The man didn't shout. He didn't even look angry. He simply placed a single sheet of paper on the marble table, for names already written in ink, and whispered, "I've been waiting for all of you." Rainwater dripped from Elara's champagne dress, pooling at her feet. Her 3 sisters pressed against her back, shivering. They were soaked, trapped, and completely alone inside a fortress built by a man who collected dangerous things. Killian Vane picked up the document and held it toward the light. It wasn't a ransom note. It was a marriage agreement, and the signature at the bottom belonged to their father. "This is a joke," Elara whispered. Killian's eyes moved to hers. Cold, patient, certain. "Your father didn't think so," he said. "He signed this 3 months ago." A cold wave of betrayal crashed through her chest. Their own blood had used them as collateral, while sitting at their dinner table, eating their food, kissing their foreheads goodnight. What Elara didn't know yet was that before this was over, she would be the one holding the contract. And she would choose to keep it. 2 hours before the marble fortress, Elara was counting tips in a glass jar. The apartment was small. The radiator knocked. Mira was painting at the kitchen table, her brushes spreading color across cheap canvas. Sage was buried in textbooks on the couch. Little Danny was already asleep, curled into a ball on the pull-out bed they still shared because the rent in this city was a joke and their father's promises were worse. It was an ordinary Tuesday. The last ordinary Tuesday of their lives. The knock at the door wasn't a knock. It was a fist. Heavy. Deliberate. The kind of knock that doesn't wait for an answer. 4 men in black suits filled the doorway. No badges. No explanations. Just cold, gloved hands and the heavy smell of expensive cologne in a cheap hallway. "Where is Vincent Vasquez?" the lead man said. "He's not here," Elara said, stepping forward. She was the eldest. She was always the wall. "We know," the man replied. They moved fast. Not violently, worse than violently. Efficiently. Like they had done this before. Like the sisters were expected cargo. Mira grabbed Elara's arm. Sage grabbed Danny. They were pushed toward the door before Elara could reach the phone. That's when she saw the kitchen table. Pinned under a half-empty bottle of scotch was a scrap of paper. She grabbed it. The handwriting was her father's, frantic, smeared, unmistakable. "Go to Vane. Do exactly what he says." "I'm sorry." "He's sorry?" Mira hissed, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "He leaves us to these people and he's sorry?" The doors of the black SUV slammed shut. Child locks clicked into place. The sound of a coffin closing. Elara held the note in both hands as the city blurred past the tinted windows. She read it again. Then again. Looking for a hidden message. Looking for anything that said this wasn't what it looked like. There was nothing. The SUVs climbed a winding private road. High iron gates swung open ahead of them. Not quickly, but slowly, deliberately, the way powerful things move when they have nothing to prove. Behind the gates sat the Vane estate. Black marble. Gold light bleeding through tall windows. Towers of dark stone rising into the wet Chicago sky. It looked less like a home, and more like a place where decisions got made that the rest of the world never found out about. "Out," a guard said. The sisters stepped into the downpour. Their dresses soaked through in seconds. They looked small against the scale of the place. They looked like exactly what they were. For women who had no idea what their father had done. The front doors opened. A man stepped into the light. He wasn't what Elara expected. He was worse. Killian Vane didn't wear a coat. He stood on the landing in a crisp black shirt, collar open, letting the rain hit his shoulders like it was beneath his notice. He was tall, broad, the kind of man who made a room feel smaller just by standing in it. He descended the staircase without hurrying. He had the slow, controlled grace of someone who had never needed to rush because nothing had ever escaped him. He stopped in front of the 4 sisters. His eyes moved across them, not with hunger, with precision. He was cataloging, calculating, the way a chess player looks at a board before the first move. His gaze settled on Elara. "You're late," he said. His voice was low, a velvet growl that vibrated somewhere behind the ribs. "Our father sent us," Elara said. She stepped in front of Danny without thinking. "He said you'd help." Something moved behind Killian's eyes. Not anger. Not amusement. Something older than both. He held up the document. Elara saw the heading. Marriage agreement. She saw 4 names. Her name. Mira. Sage. Danny. Your father didn't send you for help, Killian said quietly. He tapped the signature at the bottom. He sent you to settle a debt. And I've already signed. How much? Elara demanded. The money stopped matching the moment I signed this document, he said. You're not here as guests. He turned toward the house. Guards moved to close the circle behind the sisters. Welcome home, Killian said. He paused. A half-beat of silence. Wives. The word landed like a stone dropped into cold water. Mira made a small, broken sound. Danny pressed her face into Elara's wet shoulder. The guards moved them forward, boots crunching on gravel, the massive front doors swallowing them whole. Inside, the estate was cathedral quiet. Black marble floors polished to mirror brightness. A crystal chandelier throwing cold light in every direction. Thousands of books lining a library that ran the full length of the east wall. Killian stopped at the center of the library. He turned. He looked at them, really looked, one at a time. Mira. 24. Artist. Mira flinched. Sage. 22. Graduate student. Sage's jaw clamped shut, her eyes cutting to the velvet curtains, already measuring distance. Danny. 18. His voice dropped slightly on her name. Just. That was enough. Elara stepped forward and broke the line. She forced herself to stand close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw. Close enough to smell the rain on expensive wool. You have a file on us, she said. Photos. Ages. How long have you been watching us? Killian looked down at her. He didn't look angry. He looked like she had just become the most interesting thing in the room. 3 months, he said. Ever since your father walked into my office begging for a life he didn't deserve. He wouldn't do this. Killian reached onto the table. He slid a leather folder toward her. Page 4, he said. The folder held their entire lives. Candid photographs. Mira at the park, laughing at something off camera. Sage outside the library, backpack over one shoulder. Danny walking to school, headphones on, unaware of the lens pointed at her from across the street. 3 months of surveillance. Their father's signature on every page of authorization. He sold us, Sage whispered. She said it the way you say something when you already know it's true, but hoped you were wrong. Elara closed the folder. Her hands were shaking, but her voice came out steady. Why 4? She asked. If this was about the money, one of us would have been enough collateral. Killian's expression didn't change. It was never about the money. Then what? He moved to the window. He pulled the curtain back 1 inch. Outside, black sedans were circling the estate's fountain. No headlights, no plates, moving with the patient menace of something that had decided to wait. Those cars, Killian said, belong to a family called the Drakens. They've been building a case against my empire for 2 years. There's a clause in my family's succession law. If I die without a married, multi-branch family alliance, my entire estate transfers to the nearest contesting bloodline. Elara frowned. A legal loophole. Their lawyers found it 18 months ago. They've been waiting for me to stay single long enough to use it. So you need wives, Elara said slowly. Not because you want us. Because you need the legal structure. 4 branches. 4 signatures. 1 contract that locks every Draken challenge in court for a decade. Killian let the curtain fall. I don't need love, Elara. I need a fortress. And if we say no... He turned. His face was unreadable. The Drakens don't take prisoners. They take everything, including anyone connected to the Vane name. He paused. Including your father. Wherever he is. Elara looked at her sisters. Myra's face was pale. Sage was rigid. Danny was gripping the back of a chair with both hands. Then Elara looked back at Killian. She picked up the pen from the table, turned it in her fingers. I'm not signing anything tonight, she said. Not until we negotiate. For the first time, something shifted in Killian's expression. A subtle recalibration. You're in no position to bargain. I'm the only one who can make this look real, Elara replied. If I look like a prisoner at your tribunal, you lose. You need me to look like a partner. The silence stretched. Outside, one of the black sedans completed another slow circuit of the fountain. Killian set down his glass. Talk, he said. Elara straightened her spine. Her dress was still soaked. Her hands were still shaking. But her voice was iron. First condition, she began. The negotiation lasted 2 hours. Elara didn't sit down. She paced the library like she owned it, laying out conditions while Killian stood with his arms crossed and his face unreadable. My sisters have full freedom of movement. No guards following them. No locks on their bedroom doors. Done, Killian said. She didn't let herself react. No physical contact. Not from your men. Not from you. Nothing without explicit consent. From any of us. I am a businessman, Elara. Not a predator. His voice was flat and certain. Agreed. She had saved the hardest one for last. The one she expected him to refuse. A 90-day review clause. 3 months from today, if any of us wants to leave, the contract is void. You find another way to settle my father's debt, and we walk free. She braced herself for anger. Killian nodded. Agreed. The room went colder than it was before. He had agreed to everything. Every condition. Without hesitation, without counteroffer, without even a flicker of resistance. What does a man only give away when he's certain you'll never want it? I want the amendments in writing, she said. Typed, printed, signed. Tonight. Killian sat at the desk. He typed without looking at the keys. The printer hummed. He signed and pushed the new pages across to her without a word. Elara read every line before she picked up the pen. She had spent summers working for a property law firm. She knew what a document with holes looked like. This one had no holes. She signed. Your sisters are already being moved to their suites, Killian said. Private rooms. New clothes. The kitchen is fully stocked. He stood and walked toward the door. Then he stopped. He turned just slightly. Not enough to face her fully. You're a good negotiator, he said. His voice was quiet, almost private. You should ask yourself why a man in my position agreed to everything you asked. He left her alone with the signed papers and the sound of rain against the tall library windows. Elara stood still for a long moment. She had won the negotiation. She was certain of it. That certainty felt exactly like the beginning of a trap. She went to find her sisters. She found Mira standing at a window at the end of the east corridor, staring down into the courtyard below. Elara, Mira said. Her voice was strange. Careful. Elara looked. In the courtyard, a man in a Vane security uniform was directing the loading of a black van. Heavy crates. No labels. But it wasn't the cargo that stopped Elara's breath. It was the man's face when he turned. She had seen that face before. In the Draken files Killian had shown her as evidence of the threat outside. The fortress wasn't just under siege. It was already infected. 1 week in the Vane estate changed things in ways Elara hadn't expected. The gold-plated cage became familiar, the way a splint becomes familiar. You stop noticing the constraint and start moving around it. Mira claimed the east kitchen by the 3rd day. The smell of garlic and olive oil replaced the cold stone scent of the hallways. She painted in the sunroom every morning, her canvases growing bolder, the colors louder. Elara caught her humming once, and didn't say anything. Sage spent her hours talking to the household staff in low, careful voices. She was mapping the estate, not for escape, Elara realized, but because Sage processed fear by understanding systems. She had redesigned the supply delivery schedule by day 5 and presented it to the head of household like it was a term paper. Danny had named the guard dogs. All 7 of them. Elara watched her sisters adapt with a complicated feeling she couldn't name. Relief that they were safe. Guilt that she had signed the contract that put them here. And something sharper underneath both. The knowledge that the man in the courtyard hadn't appeared in any of Killian's security briefings. She hadn't told Killian yet. She was waiting to understand why. On the 8th night, the ground shook. The boom rolled through the estate like a physical wave. Windows in the dining room exploded inward. Mira screamed. Glass rained across the table like diamonds. Get down! Elara threw herself over Danny, her arms covering her sister's head. The alarms went off. The lights cut to emergency red. Killian appeared in the doorway 40 seconds later. No jacket. Sleeves rolled to the elbow. A pistol checked and ready. Are you hurt? He barked. We're fine, Elara said, standing. What was that? Car bomb. Front gate. So much for the fortress, Sage said from under the table. The fortress held, Killian replied. His voice was flat. That was a test, not an attack. He started to turn. Elara moved to follow him. Killian. She kept her voice low. The man I saw in the courtyard last week. Loading the van. I know that face. Killian stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. When he did, his expression had shifted. Not surprised, but calculating. Describe him, he said. She did. Every detail. The jaw. The hands. The way he moved. Killian's silence afterward was the loudest thing in the room. I've had 3 suspects, he said finally. You just confirmed which one. You already knew there was a leak. I needed someone the leak didn't know was watching. He looked at her steadily. You just became useful in a way I hadn't planned for. Elara stared at him. Was any of this an accident? She asked. Killian said nothing, which was the most frightening answer he could have given. 3 days after the bomb, Killian came to find her. He didn't knock. He stood in the doorway of the library at 11 in the morning with an expression she hadn't seen on him before, something careful, like a man about to defuse something. There's something you need to see, he said. He led her past the guest suites, past the security station, down a corridor that didn't appear on any of Sage's hand-drawn maps. He stopped at a heavy steel door and punched a code into the keypad. The door hissed open. Inside was a room that looked nothing like the rest of the estate. No marble, no crystal, a comfortable armchair, medical monitors humming quietly, shelves of books, a small window looking out onto the garden. And sitting in the armchair, older, frilier, but unmistakably alive, was their father. Elara heard Mira make a sound she had never heard her sister make before. Dad, Danny whispered. Then she was across the room before anyone could move, her arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. Elara didn't move. She stood in the doorway and looked at Vincent Vasquez, the man who had read them bedtime stories and taught them to ride bikes and apparently, 3 months ago, signed their names on a contract belonging to Chicago's most feared criminal. He's been here the whole time, Sage said. Her voice was very quiet and very dangerous. The Drakens put a hit on him before I ever met him, Killian said from behind Elara. He came to me with nothing. No money. No leverage. Just 4 daughters he was terrified of losing. So the 40 million, Elara said slowly, was the price of his protection, Vincent said. His voice was thin. Ashamed. I had nothing else to give him. I gave him the only thing that would make him legally obligated to protect you as his own family. The room went silent except for Danny crying and the soft rhythm of the medical monitors. He didn't betray you for money, Killian said. He traded your freedom to save your lives. Elara looked at her father's face. The shame there was total. There was no defense in his eyes. No justification. Just a man who had made an impossible choice and had been living inside the consequences of it ever since. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to sit on the floor and cry. She did neither. Why now? She asked Killian. Why show us today? Because the tribunal is in 72 hours, Killian said. And what you choose to do with this information determines whether we walk out of that room alive. He stepped back into the corridor. Take the time you need, he said. But Elara, when you're ready, I need you to trust me for what comes next. He left the door open behind him. Elara looked at her father, at her sisters, at the impossible, complicated wreckage of a family trying to hold itself together. She had 72 hours to decide if trust was something she had left. The East Wing erupted. Myra's anger was volcanic, the kind that had been sealed under pressure for days and finally found a crack. She paced. She pointed. She said things she had been holding since the night the SUVs came. Sage sat in the corner with her arms crossed, saying nothing for 20 minutes, and then saying everything in 2 sentences. You watched us mourn you. You sat 30 feet away and watched. Danny stayed closest to their father, holding his hand, crying quietly. She was the youngest. She still needed him to be salvageable. Vincent tried to explain. The Drakens. The hit. The impossible math of a man with no resources and 4 daughters in danger. The words were true. The sisters heard them. It didn't make the hurt smaller. Elara listened to all of it. Then she walked out. She climbed until she hit open air. The roof of the east tower was cold and exposed, the city sprawling below like a field of broken light. She gripped the stone railing and breathed. They'll settle eventually. She didn't turn around. She knew his step now. Killian leaned against the railing 6 feet away. His jacket was gone. He had a glass of something amber and the look of a man who hadn't slept in longer than he was admitting. Myra's not going to forgive him quickly, Elara said. She doesn't have to, Killian replied. She just has to be standing when the tribunal ends. Elara looked at the city. Did you know he loved us? When you took the contract, did you know it would cost him this much? Killian was quiet for a moment. A real moment. Not calculation. Yes, he said. A man who trades the thing he loves most to protect it. That's a man I can build something on. He wasn't selling you. He was buying you a wall. You could have told us, she said. From the beginning. If I told you from the beginning, you would have run. And you would have run straight into the Drakens. She didn't answer, because she knew he was right and she wasn't ready to say so. The tribunal, she said instead. What happens if we lose? My succession clause collapses. The Drakens take the estate. Your father's protection disappears. He paused. Everyone in this building becomes a loose end. The wind came off the lake, cold and sharp. What do you need from me? Elara asked. Killian turned to look at her. In the dark, with his defenses down and his jacket gone, he looked less like a monster and more like a man who had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. I need you to walk into that room tomorrow, he said, and make them believe you chose this. Elara looked at him. What if I did? She said quietly. Neither of them spoke again for a long time. The chamber felt like a verdict that had already been decided. High-backed chairs lined the walls, filled with men who ran things the city pretended didn't exist. The air smelled of old wood and older money. At the center of it all, a long table. The Draken family's lead lawyer on one side, Killian, Elara, and her 3 sisters on the other. The lawyer didn't waste time. He played a video on a mounted screen. Grainy security footage from the library. Elara, soaking wet, eyes burning with hatred, a shard of glass pressed into her own palm while she stared Killian down. Does this look like a willing bride? The lawyer said smoothly. Or a woman being held against her will? The murmur in the room was not friendly. Then came the final weapon. We have a signed statement from Vincent Vasquez, the lawyer announced, holding up a document, confirming he authorized this contract under duress. Killian looked at Elara. His expression was something she had never seen on him. Not fear. Something quieter than fear. He was releasing her. He had decided, somewhere in the last 30 seconds, to let her go. Elara stood up. Her heels cracked against the stone floor like a gavel. She walked to the evidence table and picked up the original marriage contract. Both hands. She felt the weight of it. Then she tore it down the middle. Then again. Then again. She threw the pieces into the air and let them fall like snow. That contract is dead, she said. Her voice carried to every corner of the room. Because a father does not own his daughters. And a signature taken from a frightened man in the middle of the night is not consent. The Draken lawyer smiled. Then the marriage is void. Killian Vane has no claim and no. I'm not finished. Elara reached into the inner pocket of her gold dress and produced a folded sheet of paper. She laid it on the table and smoothed it flat. Mira stepped forward. Signed. Sage stepped forward. Signed. Danny stepped forward. Her hand was steady. Signed. Elara signed last. This is a voluntary declaration of alliance, Elara told the room. Not a debt. Not a transaction. A choice made by 4 women who are no one's property and no one's collateral. She looked directly at the head of the Draken family. If you want to challenge the Vane succession, you'll need to go through all 4 of us. Individually. In 4 separate courts. For the next decade. The silence was total. The head of the tribunal, an old man with the patient eyes of someone who had seen empires rise and fall, stood slowly. He looked at the 4 signatures. He looked at Elara's face. The challenge is dismissed, he said. The alliance stands. The Drakens left without speaking. Killian exhaled, one long, slow breath, like a man who had been holding it for 2 years. 3 months later, the estate sounded different. It wasn't quiet anymore. Mira had taken over the east kitchen. The smell of garlic and basil had replaced cold marble. Sage had reorganized the security rotation so efficiently that Killian's head of operations had asked her to formalize it in writing. Danny was in the courtyard, laughing, brushing one of the guard dogs while it attempted to eat her sleeve. Vincent Vasquez tended a small garden he had built himself in the corner of the south courtyard. Killian had ordered the supplies without being asked and never mentioned it. The peace between the sisters and their father was not simple or complete. But it was real. It was being built, slowly, the way things worth keeping are always built. Elara stood in the library. The sun was low, casting long amber light across the oak table where Killian had first laid the contract. She held the original marriage agreement in both hands, crinkled, torn, the ink of her father's signature fading at the edges. She opened the mahogany desk drawer. She placed the contract inside. She closed the drawer. Keeping it? She didn't startle. She knew his step now the way she knew her own heartbeat. Killian stood in the doorway. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled up. The late light caught the edge of his jaw, the faint scar she had memorized without meaning to. Evidence, Elara said. Of what? She turned to face him. That the most feared man in Chicago was afraid of losing everything, and didn't know how to ask for help any other way. He crossed the room slowly and stopped on the other side of the desk. He looked at the drawer. The 90-day clause expired yesterday, he said. You never invoked it. I have everything I negotiated for, Elara said. Freedom. Safety. My sisters. And what about you, Elara? His voice was quieter now. What do you have? She looked at him for a long moment. I have a choice, she said. That's what you gave me. That night in the library. You agreed to every condition because you wanted me to stay with nothing forcing me to. Killian didn't deny it. It was a risk, he said. It was the only honest thing you did, she replied. She reached out and adjusted his collar, a small, deliberate gesture, her fingers resting against the fabric for just a second longer than necessary. You built this cage so carefully, she said softly. Every bar had a hinge. Killian looked at her hand, then at her face. For the first time in the entire story, in the marble hallways, the library negotiations, the rooftop at 2 a.m., the tribunal where his empire nearly fell, Killian Vane let the mask slip completely. He almost smiled. Stay, he said. Just that. One word. No contract. No clause. No leverage. Elara looked at the closed drawer, then back at him. I already am, she said. The library was quiet. The city hummed beyond the tall windows. And for the first time since a rainy Tuesday night that had broken everything, Elara Vasquez felt completely, terrifyingly, irreversibly safe.